Good morning, Rotarians. Good morning, Rotarians and guests. I'm Joe Avella, President of the Hudson Rotary Club. This is a noisy group this morning. I'd like to ask Joe Boycell to come up for the invocation, please.
Let's pray. O God, the King eternal, whose light divides the day from the night and turns the shadow of death into morning, drive far from us all wrong desires, incline our hearts to keep your law, and guide our feet into the way of peace, that having done your will with cheerfulness during the day, we may, when night comes, rejoice to give you thanks. Amen.
Joe always keeps those so short. And Tom Tobin for the pledge and four-way test.
Good morning. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it true? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill, better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you.
And our songmeister, Dick Pearsall.
I know Monday was Labor Day. When I grew up and you asked people what they did, many of them said, we work on the railroad. And so I thought in honor of that and in honor of the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railway, we're going to say, I've been working on the railroad. Now, they don't have the words, but the older generation knows the words, and the younger, you're just a nanosecond right behind them and you can pick it up. Anyway, then we're going to go, I've been working on the railroad all live long day. I've been working on the railroad just to pass the time away. Can't you hear the whistle blowing? Rise up so early in the morn. Can't you hear the captain shouting? Dinah blow, you know this one now, Paul. Dinah, won't you blow? A Dinah, won't you blow? A Dinah, won't you blow your horn? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow your horn? Here you go again. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Someone's in the kitchen, I know. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Strumming on the old banjo. You did well, I think.
All right, that's certainly a song to wake up by. That's certainly a song. I'd like to ask Chris Barker, our secretary, to come up and introduce our guests.
Good morning, Rotarians and guests. We are a lively bunch today. Well, Joe Avila would like to introduce his two guests, so if they could please come up here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. If Kathy and Jay can come up to the, stand right here, please. Oh, that's fine. Thank you. So yes, so we do have two guests today. Kathy DeLong is the I wrote it down, is the Director of Development Communications for the Cleveland Clinic. And Kathy is a colleague of our speaker, and also Kathy is a advisor with Hudson Job Search, which is where I met her. Jay Yard is a retired financial executive, moved here about a year ago from the Pittsburgh area, and moved here to be closer to his grandchildren, all of whom go to the Hudson schools. So let's give a round of applause to our guests. Thank you. So I hope everybody had a good weekend. It was a great weekend. I'll tell you, Taste of Hudson. I was at the air show. I was downtown for a while. It's a happening place, this Northeast Ohio area. So I hope everybody enjoyed their weekend. I have a sad note, but and so we'll get through that. Dexter James, his mother passed away, Virginia Warner. She passed away last week. She's from the New York area. But Dexter requested of his friends and clients that in lieu of donation, in lieu of flowers, that a donation be made to the Hudson Rotary Foundation. So I think that's very thoughtful and very generous of Dexter, and we appreciate that very much. Thank you, Dexter. Thank you. So we're going to move into our 3-minute Rotarian, who this week is Bob Cramp.
Good morning again.
Good morning, Ron.
I'll keep it to 3 minutes. Tell me if I'm going over. Grew up in Pittsburgh and became, you hate to hear this, a Steelers fan. And of course and a Pirate fan. After high school, went to Westminster College, which I think you've heard a couple times in the past that Jim Ahern and Dan Williams were also students at that school. So we have an alumni function here once in a while at our table. After Westminster, I did graduate work at, now another bad word, University of Michigan. And that's where there was a great several years there. That's where I met my wife, Sue. We were married shortly 2 years after we met each other, and our first date, by the way, was a University of Michigan football game. And we moved to Cincinnati, where I was in a doctoral program at University of Michigan and transferred to the University of Cincinnati after we got married. Completed my doctorate there, and then came to Kent State. And my job at Kent State was primarily to work with the doctoral students in marketing. But as I started my career at Kent, I realized I did not have much business experience, and yet I'm in a business school. And so I decided it was time to get some work experience. And I stayed working at Kent and teaching at Kent, and I did teach at the undergrad, master's, and doctoral level. But I started with a the first thing I did was I took a leave of absence after 4 years and went to NASA in Washington, D.C. And it was a fellowship that was available through Sears, at that time Sears Roebuck, and they offered an opportunity to 20 people a year to go to Washington and work with the government. And I applied for that, got it, and went to work with NASA in the Space Shuttle program. And the job that I got into was marketing the Space Shuttle program to business. So that started my business career. After I got back from Washington and the NASA, I started with several partners a computer business. That would have been in the 1980s. That was the time of the PC era was just beginning. And we started an Apple IBM PC store in Hudson and a couple other places. So we had a small chain of computer stores that we kept until the mid-80s, late 80s, and ideal time to get out, and we got out and sold it. And but I was still, and we did this while I was at Kent State, and I also wanted to continue doing business type consulting. So with another friend, I started a consulting business, and we did market research and marketing consulting for about the next 13, 14 years. I guess if one sentence summary of my career was that I taught at the undergrad, master's, and doctoral level while doing research at the university and consulting in the business world. Retired in 2005. As my wife says, I failed retirement very quickly, and I went back to Kent State as a director of the executive MBA program, and spent another 7 years doing that. So I'm really retired. 3 years ago is when I really finally gave it up and retired. I guess I've said enough about my sports background. I still remain loyal to the Steelers. I still remain loyal to University of Michigan. I have become an Indians fan. I've enjoyed watching them. Soon I've been married 46 years. We have 2 kids. They are both are physical therapists, and Sue's a nurse, as I think most of you know. But they're both physical therapists. The daughter lives in Atlanta. My son is just ready to move to a town in Illinois, Kewanee, Illinois. It's in the western part of Illinois as a physical therapist there. Hobbies and fun things I do. Mainly it's traveling. Sue and I have traveled a lot over the past 5 years. And we've gone to all over the world. I mean, New Zealand, Australia, China, Vietnam, Europe, and a number of other places. We also the one thing that you see me here now, but I will be leaving in another month to go to Florida. We have a condo in Florida, which we spend the winters there. And so we'll be gone October, November, December, January, February, March into Florida. Most of that time. I'll be back for Christmas. So it's a rough life, but somebody has to do it. Thanks.
I think Bob, between traveling and the Florida, I think he's nailed retirement down. I think he's got it. He's got it. Next week, our 3-minute Rotarian is Stu Murray. And so we'll pick a name for the week following that. And that will be Andy Morse. Now I'm going to pick another name. Uh-oh. It's not it's Sean Tucker is the next one. I'm not batting. I'm on a roll here. Okay, Gail Royster, next week. There you go. Okay, I'll take your name off of it. Thank you. Thanks to those Rotarians that signed up for My Rotary, which is the international website. So far, we have 22 members signed up. We want everyone signed up, but we especially need a few more. So if you need assistance on how to sign up and register, please see me. So moving on, the fun part of the meeting. Ed Sogan.
We had a question about what Fine Day is. Basically, again, it's a little fundraiser for the group. Please take out your dollar bills. Maximum fines are $5 total. Again, it all goes to a good cause. Birthday wishes, again, if you have a birthday, John, this month, what we'd like people to do is to have a birthday wish and be able to make a contribution to the group and name whatever that particular wish is for that month that your birthday is in. And let's see, Happy News will also be part of it. So if anybody has something that happened great in the recent few weeks, please raise your hand, donate a couple of bucks, and we'll have that also. We have our lovely assistants here. John Hairston, Tom Tobin will be collecting money. First thing we'll start off with no pins and no badges. So if you hold up your dollar, the gentleman will be around to contribute that. No pins, no badges. Okay. And I did pick out a couple of pretty good sized guys here, so they'll shake you down if you don't have your dollars. We're going to start off with the one of the last things with the hot dog event, our fundraiser. We had these fantastic sunglasses left over for the event, or from the event, so these belong to anybody. There's no fine. Evan? Okay.
I'll pay for that.
That's $2, Evan. Okay. All right. I'm going to kind of wrap up Taste of Hudson hopefully next week or the week after, but wanted to hit some of the highlights. And we had a lot of people volunteer. If you volunteered, please stand up and remain standing so you can be recognized. You volunteered at the Taste of Hudson. Let's have a nice round of applause. Please don't sit down. We want to go ahead over a couple of these people. We have Dick Pearsall, who showed up to sell the express card tickets. Dick, as you can see, is always immaculately dressed. He had a crisp shirt on, dress pants. He had an apron. What was the year of the apron?
2005.
2005. He's worked, every year. This was like lightly starched and pressed for the event. He had his straw hat on. The guy worked 3 hours in the 90-degree heat and just did an outstanding job. He and Lynn Zupp were the top ticket salespeople. And again, if they could have just the two of them, a nice round of applause for doing a yeoman's job. Everybody had fun doing that. The only other thing that we had, and those people that are standing, Lynn was the only one that was wearing her pin, so everybody else pay $1. Okay, so please remain standing. Everybody that, Jeff, you worked. You were in teardown. Everybody else pay $2 for not showing up. Okay? All right, you may sit down now.
We're raising big money this morning.
Okay.
Big money.
Evan McCauley. Evan shows up for setup on Friday morning, correct? About 8 o'clock. You see what he's dressed in right now. It was raining. He had a rain suit over his work clothes. These are his work clothes. He stayed till about 12:30. The heat was about 90 degrees. It's pouring down rain. The last thing he did before he left, did you go to work, actually? Okay, he stopped at Joseph A. Banks for a nice new shirt because it wasn't done. But he did a heck of a job, and I can't imagine. It was hot enough, but it was almost like a sweatsuit that he was in to work that. Rich Warfield and Jeff Tong came for a teardown along with 22 of the football team and did a great job. Just to go over these two, again, Rich has helped a couple of years. Jeff was going to help with setup and ran into a little bit of a conflict and came later. But Jeff's son, Riley, jumped in. And how old's Riley? 9. He's 9 years old. So you picture this. Again, the football team, they're carrying a couple of tables. They're carrying 10, 12 chairs. Riley's got 3 chairs. Every time he breaks them down and takes them over to the pile, Rich and Jeff are carrying 1 chair together. All right, $1 fine. You guys join a gym. Let's get in shape, for crying out loud. Jeez Louise. All right, another thing that happened, and it's not supposed to be a political event, but all of you know that Tom Tobin's running for school board, and during the entire event, he was down there with Gail, and they were chasing people around the event trying to get a vote. He had bumper stickers, badges, you name it. He was trying to get them. He threatened people with a 45-minute presentation unless they promised them a positive vote in the election. So Tom, pay $2. That's not supposed to be a political event. All right, we talked about the top ticket people, and Dan isn't here today, but Bob and Dan were on the same shift. Now, again, Lynn is out in the middle of traffic. I mean, she's waving. She looked like a barker at a circus, trying to get people to buy tickets. Their aprons were full, her and Dick Pearsall. Here's Bob and Dan. They're talking about Westminster stories and who they dated and all the rest of the stuff. Off to the side, they were there for 4 hours. They sold 1 ticket, one of the express cards, and they each kicked in $10 to buy it. So you're paying $2, 1 for Dan and 1 for you. That was pathetic. All right, Phil Warburton. I don't know where you at, Phil. Phil's a real, again, he does a lot of research. He's really into healthcare, and he's visited all the hospitals and facilities around the area. But he went to a mental health facility a couple weeks ago, and he was taken around by the director, just wanted to find out about the place, etc. He asked the director, he said, what's the criteria for a person being institutionalized? And he said, well, what we do is we fill up a bathtub, and then we give the individual a teaspoon, a teacup, or a bucket, and tell them to empty the bathtub. And Phil said, well, that's pretty easy. All you do is take the bucket, and it gets more water out of there. And the director says, no, you pull the plug, and the water goes out. Do you want a bed by the window? Okay, we have a picture in the hub from Art on the Green. If you saw that, I think it was in Sunday's hub. Unfortunately, it was of the B team. John, we were already gone. This is the B team. We've got Max. Tom, did you stay for a couple of shifts? He wanted to get in the picture, so he stuck around. Allison's there, Larry's there, Sue, Bob's wife, and Dick Pearsall. Bob is not here, according to what Sue said. He went home for a nap. Pay $1 for the nap. Sue is actually the brains behind the outfit. She is the CEO and CFO of our fundraising organization. So great job by Sue. Let's give her another nice round of applause. Okay, we've got Jim Ahern. He just told us at the table today he's got a new neighbor. And his wife, Jan, was observing, them after a couple of weeks living in the neighborhood. Jim was going out the door, and he said, our new neighbor over there, the husband gives the wife a kiss every time he leaves the house. Why don't you do that? Jim goes, I don't even know her. Okay, that was good. All right, a couple things coming up. We've got tennis courts. Tom Tobin's requesting, we got a grand opening on Saturday at 1 o'clock, correct? 1 to 1:30, just a real short ribbon cutting ceremony at the new tennis courts at the high school. Again, they are absolutely fabulous. It would be greatly appreciated if people showed up for that. Ron Strobel and Tom both said the attire for this is wear your tennis shorts, a nice knit shirt with the collar up, right? Collar up, and then a tennis sweater tied in the front. So if you're going to attend, do that. Again, Tom, pay $1 for that. We got Family Fun Fest coming up on Sunday. If you have grandkids or you have children, is for young families at Memorial Stadium. $10 for kids, adults are free. All kinds of activities, inflatables, crafts, food, the whole 9 yards. So that's this Sunday from 1 to 4. Again, it's going to be one of those days the heat is over. It should be a real nice day for that particular event. Liz Ramsey, as you know, she's had some surgeries. What was the last one, Liz? Knee. She was a little nervous about this as a different surgeon, so she put some tape or Post-it notes on her hospital gown. Okay, and according to what I heard from the hospital, one of them said, wash your hands. That's for the surgeon. The other one for the surgeon was take your time. Don't cut yourself. So she went through the surgery. She's in the recovery room, and she wakes up and she finds a Post-it note on her outfit, and it says, from the surgeon, has anyone found my wristwatch? Okay, birthdays. John Hairston, do we have a wish?
Yes.
Okay.
Do I share?
Yeah. You're not blowing out a candle, you're paying for this wish, buddy.
Well, the wish is for everyone in this room to be healthy and prosperous and continue servicing other people and just do good. That's my wish for everyone in this room and for myself, and God bless everyone. Thank you.
Very good. Another one of our members who has a, oh, geez. Golly, Nids. I forgot. Sorry, John. Forgot my birthday hat. The other member who has a birthday today is Bob Hills, and he was, again, featured in today's paper with all of our past presidents. And I'm sure Bob is going to be watching this broadcast. We're thinking of you. Marty, his lovely wife, is known in Hudson for her random acts of kindness. I know we don't want to sing happy birthday to our members here, but out to our television audience, to Bob Hills, let's have a nice happy birthday. Ready? Happy birthday to you. We need volume. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Bob. Happy birthday to you. He just turned 39. All right. Okay, happy news. David Basil, we got a microphone over there for him.
There you go, David.
Cost you a couple bucks there, big guy.
Our older son is now engaged.
All right.
Wedding is next summer.
Chris. Chris.
All right.
He was at the Taste of Hudson with you this weekend. Yep.
And next?
Yes, Gail.
Okay. We have a prospective member here who is a neighbor of yours, Ed, and mine. And
She's in the hood?
yeah, he's in the hood. And his granddaughter and my grandson are going to homecoming together, and the invitation came in the form of a piñata.
Fantastic. Jim Young.
Is this on?
Yes.
Yeah, my wife and I had an anniversary about a month ago, and my wonderful wife Karen has hung in with me for 50 years.
Well, she's going straight to heaven there, Jim. I'll tell you that right now. Happy news for me, the Taste of Hudson's over, so here's $5 for that. Tom?
Well, I can't top that 50 years, but after 52 years, I finally retired.
We could tell he's on setup. He showed at 7:29 today, so we know he's retired. All right. Next week is the distinction of having Alumni Hall of Fame, and we have many inductees. We have 7 of them coming in Saturday morning, 8:30 at Hudson High School in the Media Center. If anybody's interested in attending, it should be a great event for a great group of Hudson graduates. So thank you very much. We'll see you next month.
Okay,
Thank you, Ed. A lot of hard work goes into doing that. Just one more thing. We need another member of our invocation committee, so please see if you'd like to do that. We have 8 members, and we present the invocation every 8 weeks. See Jim Young if you'd like to do that. Next, I'd like to call up George Snyder.
Good morning, Rotarians. Good morning. The Cleveland Clinic is one of the top hospital systems in the world, and also is, you may or may not know, is Cleveland's largest private employer. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce Kristen D.W. Morris, who is the clinic's Chief Government and Community Relations Officer. In that capacity, she is responsible for a whole bunch of things, including, number one, developing and maintaining relationships at all levels of government in order to monitor developments and influence legislative outcomes critical to the clinic's mission. Number two, to foster relationships with the U.S. with the U.S. military in support of critical research and the sharing of best practices. Number three, ensuring effective relationships and communications with the city of Cleveland, and also now Akron, and with key civic organizations. Fourth, developing and leading community relations initiatives to support community and neighborhood health. And five, to create programs that encourage civic education in science and health. Prior to joining the Cleveland Clinic, Kristen served as Divisional Vice President of Federal Government Affairs for Abbott Laboratories, as Vice President of Government Relations and Public Affairs for Boehringer Ingelheim Pharmaceuticals, and as Vice President of Legislative Affairs for the American Hospital Association. She graduated from Purdue University with a double major in communications and a minor in math sciences. While in college, she interned for the House Ways and Means Committee, and after graduation served as a legislative assistant on Capitol Hill, and she remained in the Washington area until 2 years ago when she moved to Cleveland. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a very warm Rotary welcome to Kristen Morris.
Thank you so much. This is really nice. I'm actually kind of nervous. I've never spoken to a Rotary before, so this is really kind of an honor, to say the least. And I'm hoping at the end of this you'll get a sense of why hospitals take government and community so seriously. It's not just something they do for fun. And I called this the citizen experience, mostly because we really are into the patient experience. And when you think about what the hospital is required to do for our communities and the patients that we serve, it's individually what we really hope that we would do, according to the Constitution as citizens. So I kind of thought there was a little bit of an analogy there. I'm going to run through a ton of slides, and if I start getting a little bit too short, I'll cut myself off. But if there's any questions you have about anything at the end, I'm a total junkie on politics, so I'm happy to tell you who's going to win the presidency of the United States next year. Whatever you want to know, I have the answers. I think I'm doing the right one. No, it was the wrong one that I did. I screwed you up.
The one that's got a little arrow to the right.
There we go. All right. So the way that we're organized, we have four general areas. We reorganized the government and community relations function when I came on board. Government, federal, state, local, pretty obvious there, and a little bit of international because of our presence overseas. Policy, if there was anything that was sort of visionary about the way in which we reorganized, it was really dedicating people to translating what the Cleveland Clinic does into regulation and legislation more proactively, and it really required that sort of think tank function. Community, which includes the civic education component and also what we give back to the community in terms of contributions and volunteerism, et cetera. And then regional, so no matter where the Cleveland Clinic, whether we're in Akron or Florida or Nevada or any of our regional areas, there should be a certain feel for what the community can expect from us as being there and part of the community. So trying to make that consistent across the board. So we went through a classic strategic planning process, and I'm sure a lot of you have done that. And what we came up with was, why is it not? Thank you. The team came up with, for us, by our centennial, which is in 2021, we wanted to establish the Cleveland Clinic as the undisputed leader in transforming the health and wellness of the communities in which we work. So it wasn't about, we want to be the most popular in Washington, we want to make the most money, we want to do things that you probably assume an enterprise would want to be. It really is. This is what hospitals, exist or succeed upon, is really what they're doing for their community, which we are. We're the largest employer, as you were mentioning. When you have 30,000 people that are working and living in and around the communities that they work, we are the community. So it's kind of a little bit self-serving when you think about it. It's not just us giving back to the community. We really are part of it all together, and I think you all get that really well. I don't know why. I think I might need you to transfer. Okay. So let's talk about what this really is. When we talk about how we strategically do government and community relations, if you look at what healthcare is supposed to do, is take care of the population's health. If you could click it again. By the time somebody comes to the Cleveland Clinic, it's a small subset of that whole set of the population. Either people who are, self-aware enough that they're showing up and getting their health care, or they can't deny it anymore and they have to get health care. But it's really a small component. If you can click it again. What you want to do is fill in the rest of that set with a couple of dimensions. First is personal responsibility, and you want that band to be as broad as possible. I'm going to talk you through a little bit of this. Next is government. You want to have the LIHEAP or the food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, et cetera, all those programs working as effectively as possible. And then community. How is this infrastructure that supports everybody in the community, whether it be the Center for Children and Families or other social services or the churches, et cetera, that they're effectively treating and taking care of the community as they want. But the next area is this gap between where they come into the healthcare system and the things that are not really reaching the people. And in this gap lies, next click please, infant mortality, chronic disease, addiction, and obesity. And I think the question is, how much of that gap should we and can we fill? And how do we make those bands as broad as possible? So let's go to the next slide. So personal responsibility, next slide. When you look at, and I really wish this was working, I feel bad that I'm having you click all these because it has to go pretty fast. We have a community center, in which we provide an enormous amount of public service to the community in Fairfax. And so that's right around Cleveland Clinic. It serves Fairfax, Huff, et cetera. Keep going, I'm sorry. We do healthcare town halls. We work with the mayors in a variety of the areas, and if you click again, and these are the new ones. Oops, sorry. Healthcare town halls that we do that actually are coordinated so that the mayors and the community can do things that are back to the community in a way that fits. So it's not like us saying, hey, we've got this great project, how about if you do it? It really is something that's defined by the area in which the leadership is elected. Next click. So when you look at government and why we do government relations, there's the 4 R's of policy development. And if you can click, rules and regulations, reimbursement, research funding, and resources. So we do all the Federal Register notice commentary, both at the state and local level. Reimbursement, obviously 60% of all our income comes from state and federal payers, so making sure that that system reflects the way in which we really deliver care is important. Research funding, we're an academic medical center. And then the resources. How are we reaching out into the community and making sure that we're recruiting, training, and retaining people in the right way? This is just a snapshot of what we were up against last year. If all the policies, the top policies that we were looking at would have gone sideways, it would have been about $707 million per year off of Cleveland Clinic's bottom line. So if we don't pay attention to what Medicare and Medicaid is doing, we don't operate, we don't function. And if we don't help those policymakers govern a little bit better and smarter about the way in which they pay, the waste, the inappropriate incentives that are in there are extraordinary. And I really feel like the way the clinic is organized, the way that we're this large group practice model, we aren't incentivized to do procedures. We're actually incentivized to kind of do the right thing. It really is, I don't want to make that sound too trite, but it's really amazing. I can't tell you how many people, even my parents are here this week to get their care there, and they've been told a couple of times, you really don't need this procedure, but it's not, that's because we're not incentivized that way. So how do we translate what we experience into rules and regulations that can make that more common across the entire system? Next slide. So then there's state legislation. Click again. There's, for example, something that's pending that is dealing with local hiring ban. We, as part of our community benefits agreements, agree to hire so many people locally that to do our construction projects. Right now we have about $1 billion worth of construction going on at the clinic, and we really are committed to making sure that we're helping the local economy. There's legislation pending in Columbus right now that would make those kinds of agreements unlawful. You could do it voluntarily, and the Cleveland Clinic will do it voluntarily even if it's repealed. But this is a point at which some of our cities and the infrastructure and the culture around our cities is really sensitive. It's not the right time for us to pull out some of these really supportive infrastructures or policies that can help make sure that we're all giving back to the communities that really need the help. Scope of practice. Really the states define the licensure for nurses and physicians, et cetera, which you may know about. But how can we have people operating at the top of their license, as opposed to having to, figure out a way to hire and train more physicians, which we don't have enough in the United States. We're not training. We don't have enough residencies for enough physicians to serve the population as it ages. And so how can we help our nursing and our physician assistants really operate at the top of the license? And it's all done at the state level. So how can we do it right, not go overboard, but also not waste the resources that we have? At the federal level, this is 2 examples because the list is extremely long and it moves really slowly. So we could go here all day long, and it'll probably be the same issues I'd talk about next year. But we have innovation legislation where we're reforming the Food and Drug Administration and other healthcare regulatory bodies so that we can look at ways in which it can be more up to the standards of what the next century is going to require. Patent reform, refining and reforming the way patents are done, but could we be doing it in a way that would disincentivize those initiators, like the higher education, which are the ones that that do the little patents, in favor of legislation that would reform, for the large kind of combiners of patents, like the large tech companies. So there's major battles going on in which we have a large voice in it. Spending bills. I mean, I could go on. We're going to go into, and I'm sure you've been seeing it in the press, another fiscal cliff. So it's going to be a kind of a train wreck end of the year, and I'm happy to talk about that. But how are we going to be, hospitals, healthcare, et cetera, going to be on the table to pay for some of the offsets that they're going to need to deal with things like debt ceiling, et cetera, and appropriations bills? Next slide. So when we look at things that are on the table for us, graduate medical education, here ironically I'm talking about a physician shortage, but at the same time one of the biggest pay-fors to offset the debt ceiling is to cut graduate medical education, and I can tell you why that's out there. Outpatient payment and site-neutral payments. Large hospitals, generally it costs more to do certain procedures than it does if you go to a surgery center somewhere. So how are we going to equalize those without actually cutting down the difference in intensity that you might get in the different settings? Essentially not all settings are created equal by design. So we have to really make sure we have relationships with every single one of these people, because you don't want to walk in and say, hey, you know what, I got a problem, you don't know me, you don't trust me, you have no clue if I have any credibility, but you really got to listen to me. I mean, this is like, many of you have been in sales or marketing. You don't go in and ask for a favor when you are desperate. So it's constantly really making sure people understand what we stand for, who we are, and make sure we have those credible relationships at all the time. And then we have the convention coming. And if that's not an opportunity to make sure that Northern Ohio shines, I don't know what is. When you have the largest media event other than the Summer Olympics, shame on us if we don't tell everybody about how great this part of the world is. So as far as our concern, and my concern is, it's not about the politics that are going on there, because Cleveland Clinic doesn't really engage in politics or partisan politics for sure. But it's really about how can we make sure that the community is just shining and telling its story about its innovation and about what we do to give back as an anchor institution to the community. Next slide. I could talk about these guys and women all day long, and we've got the other slide, which is the Democrats, and we could talk about them as well, some of whom you probably don't even know, but actually some of them are pretty decent people. Jim Webb is fabulous. But here's the one thing, one of the penalties, is my favorite quote, one of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. And you may have heard this before. Next. Plato said that. So this is not something new. So if there's nothing else you get from this speech, next, you gotta vote. I'm sure every one of you do vote, but you have no idea how many people don't. And especially when we're all kind of ticked off or disgusted by things and you can't vote no. I know my dad keeps saying, why can't I just vote no? That's not allowed. But I really, really want to make sure that everybody votes. Next slide. So let's go into the community real quick. This is our community benefits chart. This is our 2014, so this isn't even public yet. But when you look at all the things that we do in the community, education is the biggest one. We fund about 100 additional residency slots over and above what we're paid for by the government. Research, we spend $70 million more than what we get from our grants, again, just out of the bottom line of the Cleveland Clinic to augment what we're doing. The financial assistance pie is going down because of the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid expansion, but it's still $101 million per year as a result of indigent care. Medicaid shortfall is huge. It pays about 65 cents on the dollar, so that additional $1.36 is really what that adds up to be. And our Medicaid population is getting larger and larger all the time. And then subsidized health services, and that's a random outside of giving health. It's just the technology that goes around with it. But the outreach programs, it's about $45 million. That's essentially my program and what we give back to the community, and also the voluntary hours that people give back to the community. So it's a really small part of what we do overall, but in my opinion, it's incredibly important because it's what everybody feels and sees more. So if you can go to the next slide. And we continue to, even despite the Affordable Care Act and all the other government programs, we continue to give more and more every single year back to the community. Next slide. Here's a workforce development example. So we merged together with other community organizations so that we can do what I believe is the most important thing we can give back, and which is jobs. It's not about handouts. Really, and we all know this. The best way to sustain people and to really fight poverty is to help people get out of it. So we've reformed. We have a new, my counterpart who runs human resources. He's amazing. He came from the East Coast and just really has some great philosophies on how we can do and develop workforce. So we've gotten a fairly sizable grant to reach out, identify, train, recruit, retain, and advance workforces from our communities in which we exist. Next slide. We also do internships, which is another, I think, great entryway to inspire people to work in the field that otherwise may not have access or hope for a job. And we do about 1,000 internships a year, most of which are credentialed, or you get college credits or high school credits for them. And I got to tell you, it's one of the most rewarding things to go through when you go through graduation at the end of the year. Next slide, please. Then on top of the internships, we actually reach out into the schools and we do different things to build on those throughout the year so that we can reach every school in the area, because not everybody can be an intern. So the Expressions is one of my favorite ones. They take the research that were done by the students that did our science and internship programs, and we bring them to the schools. Those students present them to the schools, and then the schools do art and other types of literature projects around it, and then we have a competition around it. So the entire school systems get involved in what those students were really able to do throughout the year. Then we have our nutrition programs, et cetera, and Healthy Futures, where we go in and train the teachers on how to help on wellness, et cetera. And so when you look at the number of schools and students that we get involved in Northeast, outside of Northeast Ohio, about 32% of all our educational programs are national, but 68% of our programs are all in the Cleveland area school system, which includes this area. It's a pretty wide circle. So it really is a broad outreach. So then here's our gap. And so if you link this to what we're trying to do in healthcare transformation, next slide. It really is our strategy to try to figure out how do we get at some of these things depending on which community it is and tailor it to the community. So for example, at South Point Hospital, we have a new doctor of osteopathy medical school going in together with Ohio University. And so we're looking at the Warrensville area and the neighboring communities as a place to really experiment on how we can take population health to another level. And we're working with mayor and other officials and other community leaders to show how we can create a platform that we can replicate from community to community. Next slide. Sorry, it grows. So here's the last slide I'm going to leave you with. And so this is what I think from a clinical perspective, what we hope all this adds up to. If this is, and I don't know if this pointer works. If this is the curve of health, you start off at the top, and if you can click, basically you're going to your primary care physician or not, but theoretically you'd be educated and you have your general health and nutrition, et cetera, and you're being managed on a regular basis if you have a cold, et cetera. Then you have an episode that happens, and you're at the bottom of your curve. So, and then you're coming out of your episode, and do you return to baseline? A lot of people don't, unfortunately, and their wellness is a little bit lower. What we're trying to accomplish is more along this line, if you can click again. And then you still have your regular education and episode management, but you have your teachable moment as you're starting to go down the curve. So your knees are starting, I'm just giving an example, your knees are starting to give out, and you're starting to ask questions, et cetera. can you be encouraged to perhaps, work on your wellness overall, lose the weight, start being, a little bit more responsible about your exercise, maybe modify your house a little bit so your falls might be less a little bit, not as at higher risk, et cetera. And then you get the family support and your community support to make sure that when you're in your episode, that you're being cared for and educated and not left alone, not in a situation where you can actually deteriorate a little bit more. And you, with the regular education, theoretically, you could actually come out of that episode at a higher baseline than you went into it. And we've proven that through some grants that we've gotten with, I want to say Euclid Hospital. Thank you, Euclid Hospital. In our osteopathic area, where it's really been effective. We do home studies, we help people redesign their homes, we work with the community, and we've shown amazing return back to the function that really was not seen in any of our other environments before. So this concept definitely works in certain settings, so how can we expand that and can we make it work broader? But this requires payment reform, this requires community support, and it requires a different way of engaging with the patient other than just seeing them doing the surgery and letting them go. It's a regular relationship. So I hope you've gotten a sense of what population health means to hospitals and why we have to have all these components to surround it to make it really work effectively. And I think with that, I am done. If you can click again just to make sure there's no more slides. I am. So thank you very much for your time. Do we have time for questions? If we have any questions, I'm happy to take a few.
Hello.
Hi.
I've always wondered, are all the Cleveland Clinic doctors, are they paid by Cleveland Clinic? Do they have their separate roles, or how does it all work? I mean, there are so many of them, or is it all mixed?
Well, on main campus, it's an employed model. And generally, our hospitals tend to be employed models, but when you get out to the regional hospitals, there's a lot of private practice. And then they're linked together through a quality alliance. So if you want to be affiliated with the Cleveland Clinic as a private practice physician, there's an expectation that you would have certain quality measures and requirements that you comply with. So it's not come one, come all. But it really, the main campus is definitely an employed model, but as we get to the regions, it's different. So for example, Akron General is going to be a combination of just essentially exactly what it is now.
Kristen, the question, I don't know if this is an area you get into, but found in a recent visit to the hospital, they do a lot of tests, and I realized all the incentives are to do more tests because, I mean, I'll assume that it's for safety purposes, not because they also make a lot of money on it, but also if they don't do the tests, they could be liable if, if
Right.
something is found later. So it seems to be there's huge expense associated with lots and lots of these types of tests. And then the other area is end-of-life care and, doing a lot of different procedures towards the end of life. Again, very expensive. Again, disincentive if you don't do it and someone really wanted to have it done, that you should have done it. So it seems to be sort of a conundrum where everything legal, liability, everything pushes towards increasing that amount of
I think all of those are definitely factors. I think you characterized it well. What we're doing at the clinic to try to limit that dynamic from what we can control is something called healthcare pathways. So we actually have the institute in question take a procedure or an episode of care and then draw out a pathway that is the highest, most likelihood trail of success. And in that, it will say, this test or not this test or this test, et cetera, so that you limit that over-testing dynamic and you do maximize the affordability of that particular procedure. What we really do mean it, we know that payment's going to change. And we know it, our agreements with the private payers and MMO is all working toward this risk agreement, et cetera. And so it is absolutely in our interest to figure out the best way, to get the information we need to give the best care without that extra waste and not let that fear of liability, et cetera, be there. I mean, the Cleveland Clinic purchases the liability insurance for the physicians that practice there. So the physicians at the Cleveland Clinic aren't personally aware of, as sensitive to their liability costs as what maybe a private practice might. So again, we have kind of a little bit of an interesting environment to do that sort of research. But it is, I think we have a very litigious society. I mean, it's across the board, but it's particularly present in healthcare. There's a bus that stops in front of the Cleveland Clinic that's wrapped with the lawyers. Have you been hurt? Has your baby been hurt? Please call us. And it's our culture, and I really resist it. I would rather. I love your four sayings. When you're doing something, it's not what do I owe or who gets punished for something bad that's happening to me. You have to think about the big picture. So I also support reasonable liability limitations too. But I hope that answered your question. We're trying to limit the testing.
Kristen, a couple questions over here.
Okay.
There's been a lot of discussion over the last many years regarding, the absolute need for exercise, and then lots of discussion on the trends in obesity.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, primarily on the youth side, do you feel overall we're making progress as a nation, when it comes to youth obesity? Do you think the culture focused on, better nutrition and combined with exercise is beginning to take hold, or what's your assessment of those trends?
So the obesity continues to, on the average, get worse. And yet at the same time, the knowledge around nutrition is improving and people are reportedly eating better. What I think is happening is that I think we're starting to see a bifurcation, and it's all education-based. I mean, the more educated you are, the better your health is going to be. And so I think we have a poverty issue that really is disproportionately being malnourished. And when I say malnourished, you're not starving, you're just eating poorly. And there's a couple of things that you look at. What are the common threads when you have bad outcomes, or what are the common threads in terms of whether it be crime or anything? A lot of things happen because of depression, i.e. lack of hope, and poverty. So if we can figure out a way, I think to kind of, as what we say, looking at our communities, and what I think some of what your mission is to look at our communities and try to give that hope and et cetera, because we have saturated, the government is saturated, schools have saturated as much as I can imagine in terms of what it is to eat right. I mean, even when I was a kid, they were teaching us about the food groups and the pyramid, et cetera. So it's a choice. But how do we make that choice something that is educated and not something done out of ignorance? And but the trend is still bad, really, really bad, even though the information is out there. So we haven't cracked that nut yet.
What about
Exercise, from my understanding, is not going in the right direction either. So that's a big thing. I think we're getting cut off, but thank you very much. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Kristen. Thanks for coming and down here, and it was very, very informative. So to wrap up our meeting, I would like to thank our greeters, Ed Sogan and Roseanne. Our AV and setup crew, Tom Page, Tom Tobin, Jeff Tong, James Field, John Hairston, Den Rich, and from Service Learning again today, Bella Morala. There's a board meeting following our meeting. Everyone is invited to attend. And now for our 50-50 Rotabuck drawing. It is $15 to the winner, and $704 is the jackpot.
Awesome.
So. I let Craig draw it as long as he didn't draw his own. The last four numbers, 3362. 3362. All right. There's a black marble there.
Hey, that.
Maybe next time.
Thank you.